If you're like me and you're playing your wildcard and FPL this week, then this is the video for you. Hey everyone, and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. I'm Sam, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and that's right, I'm on a wildcard this week. I figured it was probably about the right time to hit it. I've been looking at playing the wildcard over the next couple of weeks anyway, but with the way my team was performing, now seemed like the right time. So I've put together 5 FPL drafts that I really like the look of ahead of Gameweek 8. And because I'm also on a wildcard, you know that I'm going to be taking a lot of care in making these as good as possible. So starting off with number 1, a few of the players remain in most of these sides, so I'll go through them first, and then hopefully after draft number 1, we can speed up with a few of the differences. So in number 1, to start with, Cash and a doggy make, I think, every single one of my drafts so far. Now, Cash, I think, is probably one of the best budget enablers in the game right now. His attacking threat is pretty decent for Aston Villa anyway, and he's got a great run of fixtures to come. More on that later with the other Aston Villa assets as well. But Cash also has been playing on the right wing sometimes. Even when he's not playing right wing, at right back, he's still getting forward, he's still getting into those attacking positions, and he will tick over with the assists. So I still really like him as an option. 4.8 at the moment. He probably will rise tonight. I'm recording this on Sunday, by the way. So if he does rise tonight, he'll be 4.9. The team value for this draft will go up to 100.2. And that's another note to mention now before we get into all of them. The team value on the left is if you were to buy all of these players for the first time today. So if you already own these players, you've probably got value tied up on them, so you're probably going to get to this draft a little bit easier. And then also, if you're looking at selling players, then you need to consider how much team value you really have once you've sold all of your players. So if you're looking at pressing that wildcard, maybe just check the selling value of all of your players. You might have some cash stored up in some of them. So for example, if you've got Bukayo Saka, he started at 8.5, now at 8.7, so you could sell him for 8.6. So just be careful with how much real value you've got tied up in your team before you start thinking, oh, I've got more than 100.1 in my bank at the moment, so I can easily afford this draft. Just be slightly careful there. But anyway, moving on, a doggy I think stays in most drafts at the moment. The other option you could be looking at for a Spurs defender is Pedro Porro. For the sake of budget, I've gone with a doggy in all of these drafts, but I really like the look of Porro. If you can afford that little extra more, then I'd definitely check him out. But I think I'm fairly happy with a doggy's attacking upside. I don't think he's a player that I'm looking to shift out of my side. I've already got him. So I'm pretty happy to just continue owning him. He's also been playing in 2 pretty difficult fixtures recently where he's had to man mark really good wingers. So he hasn't been able to get forward quite as much in the last couple of weeks. Whereas with the fixture run ahead, I do really fancy him for some attacking returns. In the midfield, the players that I think are in all of my drafts are Heung-min Son and Mo Salah. Actually, I do have a non-Mo Salah draft later on, so do stay tuned for that if you want to have a look at that. But Heung-min Son definitely features in all of my drafts. I think not only is he a captaincy option this week, but also in the weeks ahead, you could potentially still be looking at captaining him in even game week 9 against Fulham at home, for instance. And because he's so attacking in that centre-forward role, he did get taken off slightly early, but it sounds like he had a little bit of a knock, so one to monitor, but it doesn't look like that's been aggravated by the win over Liverpool. So I expect him to start. He looks talismanic at the moment, and he is an explosive player up front for Spurs. At 9.3 million now, I still think he's value for money. He's going to be in every single one of my drafts at the moment. Maddison is in most of them, but I think in 1 or 2, I have a look at switching him out. I still think he's a great option at 7.9 million. Again, great run of fixtures like with Heung-min Son and Udogie, but I don't think he's quite as essential as Son. I don't think he's as explosive as Son is. And if Son's the one getting the goals, Maddison's probably the one getting the assists. So I'm very happy to own both. But I think if one were to drop out of my ideal wildcard draft because I needed to sacrifice some money to open it up elsewhere, then Maddison would probably be the one out of the 2. Mo Salah is in 4 out of the 5 drafts I'm going to show you today. Mo Salah, I think, is one of the reasons I'm wildcarding this game week. I want to get to him now before he starts exploding. Brighton away from home is a good fixture to start it off, and the run of fixtures from now on, all the way to game week 16 or 17, look really, really positive for Liverpool. They're still a team that are getting plenty of underlying XG, so I really like the look of him anyway. He's also arguably more of a creator than in previous seasons as well. He might be playing ever so slightly more out wide, but actually the amount of big chances that he is creating is really helping him on the bonus system at the moment as well. In the past, he's been slightly weak on the bonus. He needed usually 2 attacking returns to get maximum bonus points, but so far this season we're starting to see him get 1 attacking return, and with the chances he's creating also rank really high on the bonus system as well. So really like the look of Mo Salah at 12.6 million now. He's tough to get into your side, and we will have a look at a draft without him in a minute, but I think if you can get to him, he's a player I definitely want to own. Erling Haaland is in all of my drafts. I think there will be people looking at maybe gambling without him, but I think if you're looking at the strongest possible draft at the moment, even if you think that you could bet against him in a few weeks with captaincy, I still think he's going to tick along with plenty of goals. So I'm not brave enough to go against Erling Haaland, but do let me know in the comments below if you wanted to see a no Erling Haaland draft. I'm more than happy to prepare one for you if that is the case. Outside of that, Areola and Turner are the combo of keepers that I'm looking at the moment. If you need an extra 0.1, I wouldn't mind sacrificing Turner and getting a 3.9 million bench fodder keeper, but I think Areola will be my starting keeper most weeks. However, in game week 8 specifically, I do prefer Turner's fixture. So if he can keep his place against Crystal Palace, I would prefer to start him. But Areola at 4.2 million is great value for money. If Turner continues starting as well at 4 million, I still think that's fantastic. Outside of that, the bench looks fairly similar. I think Archer and Taylor are in all of my drafts. Archer at 4.5 million. I think if you needed that extra 0.2, then you could go for a Mabama, but keep in mind that he's never going to play for you. Archer is getting minutes, and he's likely going to get the odd attacking return here and there, so I don't mind holding him on my bench at 4.5. And then Taylor at 3.9 is pretty much third on my bench every single week. I don't expect to start him very often at all, but if I ever needed him, at least he's a player that looks like he's at least starting for Burnley at the moment. So I think he's an easy enough hold just to have at third sub. With this draft in particular, it's 100.1 million. I've gone with Dan Burn and Botman as the 2 Newcastle defenders. If you can stretch to a Trippier in this draft, I would love it. But I think in most drafts I'm looking at the moment, I need to get rid of at least one of Trippier, Maddison, or Watkins. In this draft, I'm calling it the no Trippier draft. Burn and Botman are the 2 Newcastle defenders that I'm going to have in place of Trippier, and it means that I can have Maddison and Watkins, as well as a pretty strong 5 across midfield, including Diaby and Ward-Prowse. Now, Trippier is a pretty hard player to back against, but I think the fixtures, I think there are clean sheets there for Newcastle, and if I can have double defence, then that might give me the edge. And with Botman out for 1 week, I think it's going to put a lot of people off of going for him. But it looks like, because we've got that international break, that even though he's going to be out for a couple of weeks in terms of his actual injury, in terms of game weeks, he might be back in game week 9. So I'd be fairly happy holding him and just putting him on the bench in game week 8, hoping that he's back fit in game week 9, and then I've got that double Newcastle defence if I ever wanted to use it. It is going against Trippier though, so that is the one sacrifice with this draft in particular. However, the upside is I get Maddison against Luton and the great fixtures ahead. I've got Diaby with Aston Villa's fantastic run going forward as long as he's fit. And Watkins very similar as well. With Aston Villa's run, I'd love to have the triple up. I think Diaby is the one that I'd be most willing to sacrifice out of those 3. I think Cash is in all of the drafts. Watkins is pretty much in all of the drafts bar 1. And Diaby is probably the player that I think you can find alternatives that are going to be nearly as effective. I think you could arguably go for Mitoma in a couple of game weeks and probably back against Diaby, but for the time being, I still really like him as an option. And then Ward-Prowse, I think West Ham are going to be fantastic over the next 8 or 9 game weeks. Their next 2 games aren't fantastic, but after that, their run looks really, really promising. So Ward-Prowse could be a player that you back early, and if you can't afford a Bowen, I really don't mind Ward-Prowse. He even got a bonus point without an attacking return last game week, week. So that's just how many chances he's creating at the moment. I think he's going to tick along really nicely. And he's also getting into more advanced positions than he ever got into at Southampton. And he is also going to hopefully tick along with open play chance creation and a few goals here and there, which we aren't so used to him having in seasons past either. So I think he'll tick along really nicely at 6.3 million. I really like the look of him. So that's draft number 1. Do let me know in the comments what you think of this draft. And let's move over to a very slight difference in draft number 2. So, if draft number 1 was slightly too expensive for you, or you didn't like the look of having triple Villa, or that you didn't really like the look of James Ward-Prowse over a Bowen, then this is a very similar draft that has that one little tweak in midfield. So what I've gone with to save an extra 0.2 million to make it that little bit more affordable is go with Bowen instead of Ward-Prowse, which does cost me an extra 0.9 million. But then I've also downgraded Diaby to Neto. Now, Diaby, because he could be injured, I don't think he will be, but because he could be injured, you might be looking at mixing that up a little bit. Neto, even without the good fixtures, has been ticking along really nicely, and Wolves look like a team that are going to score a few more goals than maybe we're used to Wolves actually scoring in any given season. Neto looks like he's in the form of his life, and at 5.6 million could be a great budget enabler to help open up moves elsewhere. Bowen, I think, is a fantastic option at West Ham at the moment. Even without the fixtures, he's been brilliant. And with the fixtures to come, I think he's just going to start ticking over really nicely. He's much more of a goal threat than James Ward-Prowse, so I think points are going to flow towards Bowen more often than they will for Ward-Prowse. It's just whether or not you think that extra 0.9 is worth it. Bowen, I think, will also remain fairly differential because I think a lot of us are going to end up on a Maddison-Diaby combo. If you can stretch to a Bowen ahead of a Diaby, and you've still got Watkins up front as well, so you're still pretty much backing Villa anyway, I think having Bowen could be a really nice differential in any draft. And with this one in particular, it saved you that little bit of money, so maybe it's just that little bit more affordable. Because draft 1 and draft 2 are so similar, do let me know which you prefer as a combination out of James Ward-Prowse and Diaby, or Bowen and Neto in the comments below, because I don't know which one I actually favour at the moment, and I could see myself going either way. So draft number 3 are for those of you that would prefer to have Kieran Trippier in your side. It is a little bit more expensive at 100.4 million, but if you've already got Trippier in situ, then maybe that becomes a little bit more affordable anyway, because you might already have accrued a little bit of value in him either way. There are 4 differences to this side. So number 1 is Trippier comes in for Sven Botman. Now, obviously that costs 2 million extra, and Dan Burns moved to the bench. So that 2 million needs to be saved elsewhere. And what I've done to make sure that I can actually fairly afford this draft is downgrade Jarrod Bowen to Moussa Diaby, because I still want that Aston Villa cover. And as you can see up front is the big downgrade of moving Ollie Watkins down to Julian Alvarez. Now, some of you might argue that's not even a downgrade. For 1 million less, you've got a player pretty much second striker for Man City at 7 million. He's on set pieces. The fixtures aren't really there for City from this point on, but as you know, City can clock 2xG against pretty much anyone. I think the Wolves result was just maybe a bit of a blip, so there are a lot of you out there that might still want Alvarez on a wild card over an Ollie Watkins, and you're happy to cover up that Aston Villa spot with Moussa Diaby in the midfield anyway. So this one is a little bit more expensive. It does mean that you can get Trippier, and his upside is so fantastically high over the other Newcastle defenders if they keep a clean sheet, because of the chances that he creates. As long as none of the other defenders get any sort of attacking returns, 9 times out of 10, he's the one that will take the maximum bonus points over any of the other defenders who have kept a clean sheet in that Newcastle lineup. And as we've seen in recent weeks, he's really starting to clock up the chances and the XA. And even though he won't score 4 assists in 2 game weeks from now until the end of the season, he'll tick over really nicely. The fixtures are still pretty good for Newcastle from this point forward. And as you can see, I've still got the double Newcastle defence with Dan Burn in situ on the bench. So overall, I really like the look of this draft. It's just whether or not you're happy going without Ollie Watkins. And I think before this game week, most people were. In game week 7, all of the wildcarders pretty much avoided Ollie Watkins and just went with Moussa Diaby. I don't think there's anything against that now. It's just that maybe Ollie Watkins has caught our attention that little bit more with the fixtures to come and the fact that we know that he can be explosive. This is his second hat-trick of the season after all in all competitions. Ollie Watkins feels like a bit of a pick that you'll have as an advantage over people who don't wildcard because it's quite hard for them to get to him, and people who have already wildcarded because most of them probably went without Ollie Watkins. So I quite like this draft, but it does have that one little asterisk that Ollie Watkins isn't in situ, but you do have Kieran Trippier. So draft number 4 today is a little bit of a different setup, and those of you that don't really fancy a 3-5-2, maybe you fancy a 4-4-2. This one has double Newcastle defence pretty much every game week, so Trippier and Burn are still the two in there at the moment. Because I'd be starting Burn week in, week out, you probably can't go for a Botman because he will be probably out in game week 8. The key difference here is you're downgrading Maddison to a Bowen, arguably maybe not even a downgrade considering Bowen's explosivity and goal threat. And you're also getting rid of that 5th midfielder. That 5th midfielder has been downgraded all the way to a 4.3 in Chukwuemeka, and that 4.3 million midfielder probably makes your bench a little bit weaker because you're usually going to be needing him to sit on your bench. He might start a few games moving forwards. He was in the Chelsea lineup before he got injured, but I don't think we can necessarily guarantee it. And with Chelsea's fixtures to come, I think that having that 4.3 million midfielder is purely to enable some budget. Now, as you can see on the left, this draft is a lot cheaper than the other ones. So this might be one that those of you who don't have great team value might favour over the others. And I really don't hate it, to be fair. I think there's a lot of goals in this side. You've kept Ollie Watkins in there as well, as opposed to the last draft, and you've still got Triple Villa, you've got Jarrod Bowen, who it looks like a really good goal threat for West Ham at the moment, you've kept Son Heung-min and Salah, and you've got Trippier as well. So I think if you are determined to make sure you can squeeze in Trippier, Son, Watkins, Haaland and Salah, maybe 5 of the most valuable picks at the moment to get on a wild card, then maybe you'd be willing to get rid of James Maddison and have Bowen as that alternative to enable that little bit extra budget. I mean, if you've got that at 0.7 to upgrade this draft to a 100.1 million, then you could also have James Maddison instead of Bowen. But I don't mind Bowen as an alternative here, and going with a 4-4-2, if you're backing that Newcastle defence, might not be the worst idea. They have looked really tight recently. The only asterisk I'd put on this one is Archer being usually your first sub. I don't mind it this week against Fulham away from home, but moving forwards, is that enough cover on your bench to guarantee that you're feeling secure if injury strikes or if rotation strikes? I'm not 100% convinced, and it's probably not the draft that I'm going to end up on. But I really don't hate it, and having 4 at the back, especially with double Newcastle defence, puts you maybe one step ahead of a lot of other wildcarders who might only be going with 1, and it means that you're not compromising on the Newcastle defenders of choice. You're getting Trippier in, who's going to be getting those attacking returns, and unlike the previous draft, you've got Trippier and Watkins, who both seem like really helpful picks to have on a wildcard this game week. Right then, at the start of the video, I promised that there is a no-Mo draft out there, and this is it. As you can see, I've moved Mo out for Bukayo Saka. Now, that enables a lot of other moves elsewhere, but first of all, let's cover off that one. I think there is logic to the idea that you could go without Mo Salah. The fixtures are really good moving forwards, but he's possibly slightly less of a goal threat than we've seen in recent seasons, and he is a lot of money. At 12.6 million, you've also got a player in Bukayo Saka who's 4 million less or 3.9 million less, who is also getting really good underlying data, is getting the goals, getting the assists, and is usually playing for 80, 90 minutes every single game week, barring coming off with an injury this week, of course. The fixture ahead for Arsenal against Man City isn't ideal, but you'd expect them to raise their game, and you'd also expect them to find a way of making sure that Saka plays that game, even if he doesn't play in the Champions League in midweek. And then moving forwards, he's a player that a lot of us are going to want to scramble back to in 2 or 3 game weeks, around about game week 10, I believe, when they play Sheffield United, and then their run isn't so bad after that. So I think Bukayo Saka is a player that a lot of us are going to be getting rid of on a wild card, but maybe he's just a player that we can back throughout the season. There's a lot of people with value tied up in him at the moment. Maybe he's a player that you don't want to be getting rid of. And that's the argument there, that you're basically challenging Mo Salah with a Bukayo Saka, but then also you're using that extra 3.9 million elsewhere in the side to make those upgrades and get the best of everything else. So in all of the other drafts I've showed today, you haven't been able to get Trippier, Maddison and Watkins in. You've had to sacrifice at least one of them. In this draft, we've got all 3 of them. And rather than sacrificing that 5th spot to get to a Neto or even a Chukwuemeka or a James Ward-Prowse, in that 5th midfield spot, you've got Jarrod Bowen, who, as I mentioned, I think is going to be a fantastic differential on a wildcard this game week. That front 7, barring the fact that you don't have Mo Salah, does look really, really strong. So it's whether or not you could live with the fact that you're going without a Mo Salah on a wildcard draft, and whether you think having this 7 in midfield and up front is going to be able to match and outscore your team with Mo Salah and the other compromises you have to make to get to Mo Salah. Also, I should mention in goal, I've had a bit of a cheeky punt on David Raya. Now, again, the City fixture in this game week probably isn't ideal. In fact, you probably have a bit of competition whether or not you start Areola or Raya in this game week. But just for the sake of showing that he's in my side, I've put him to start against Man City. And if he can keep his place at Arsenal, which I think is probably going to be fairly secure, he's a player that in recent seasons we've seen is really good on the bonus points. He gets a lot of save points as well, and he'll be a proper differential in comparison to most of us who will go with that combo of a 4.2 million keeper in Areola with someone like a Turner or even a 3.9 million keeper. So that's what a no Mo Salah draft can get you to. And I think Saka could arguably go up against him and give competition to Mo Salah for points this season. But personally, I don't think I could wildcard and not get to Mo Salah with those fixtures ahead. Do let me know in the comments below what you think of that, whether you'd go no Mo, whether you'd even consider it, whether you think Bukayo Saka could potentially match him in the next few game weeks. I'm probably a no, but I do want to get back to Bukayo Saka in the next few game weeks, so maybe I've got a little issue there with the other drafts that I don't have here. Okay, so those are the 5 wildcard drafts I've got for you today. I'm going to be tinkering all game week, and I will be showing my final wildcard selection on a Thursday or Friday in my team selection video. So do make sure you like this video if you enjoyed today's, but also subscribe so you don't miss out on my final wildcard draft come Thursday or Friday, because a lot more thinking needs to go into it yet. In the meantime, I hope you all, if you're on a wildcard, enjoy planning, and if you're not, just enjoy having a nice relaxing game week, not worried about the wildcard whatsoever, and I'll see you later on this week.